Okay, guys, welcome to Kyalami. It's time for the deep dive. Let's see. Initially, what I want to say about Kyalami. One of my favorite tracks. I love it. I think it has absolutely its own character, distinct from every other track that's in the game, and I just think it's fantastic. It makes for excellent racing, and the big thing about it, I think, is that it is a deceptively fast track. Now, when we think of fast tracks in the game, we obviously have a tendency to think of Monza, Silverstone, Spa, those types of tracks. Whereas Kyalami is kind of, I think, has a tendency to be thought of more as a mid-speed level track. But I think of it as a high-speed track in this sense. Your your ability to carry speed through each and every one of the corners is critical to you having success at this track, right? It is a very flowy track, all over the place, and even in the slowest corners, right? You they're not true slow corners. Every single corner here that is the slowest that you'll see me take in first gear, you could also take in second gear, and they immediately, generally speaking, they immediately flow into to the next corner, right? So I think that it has a much faster feel to it than some of the tracks that are considered fast tracks. So your ability to maintain a speed throughout the course of corners, combinations of corners in the course of the lap, determines your success here at Kyalami, in my opinion. So let's get to it with that thought in mind, because that's something that I'm going to be talking about a lot, I think, in every one of these corners that we go through. And I'm going to go up to the apex first of what is technically turn 2, but is effectively our first corner on the track, because talking about up here at the apex is important to what we're going to do beforehand. Sorry, I just finished my second piece of the cake for the day. Let's get it up here a little ways. Okay, so let's look first of all at the curb. The curbs here at Kyalami are not as dangerous as they are at a lot of other tracks. You can absolutely use them in a lot of cases, but I do think you have to know when to use them and how to use them, and that starts right here. So although this is one time where I wish we had the free cam that is available on PC, because it would be much better to get really down to ground level and take a look at the shape of the curb. But if you get a good enough look at it, and I think we'll get a better look at some of the other ones later on, what you see actually is a bit of a point up at the top of the curb, right? And it is that point, really, I think you want to avoid the extent that you can and slow it, okay? So if the width of it, the point is probably about a third of the way up from the right hand side, and I don't think you want to mess with those any more than you have to. Okay, so if you are just brushing the this curb going up oh, maybe 8 inches to a foot at the most, then I think you're going to be in good shape. But if you start getting up too high on it, you're going to start unsettling the car, and that's important for this for the corner, because this corner is off camber, meaning that the track is away from the direction you're trying to turn. So you are in a position when you make this corner where the end is naturally loose, right? Traction is an issue when you start picking up the throttle at this corner because it is off camber. If you take too much of this curb at the same time that you're trying to tackle that camber issue, you're going to add instability that's already inherent in the rear end by virtue of the nature of the corner, right? So it's perfectly okay, I think, to catch a little bit of this curb, but you do not want to catch too much of it, or you're going to start running into serious traction issues as a result, right? The other thing is that when you come out into your exit, there is a considerable amount of wiggle room on where you exit this. You'll see I generally come out center to center right. A lot of people will come out all the way over to the right side onto the red and white striping. Some people will come out even narrower, more into the middle of the track. The big key is that once whatever you choose to do based on how you want to drive and the car that you're driving, whatever you choose to do, you must be able to go back to full throttle right here because you're not going to let up until you get to turn 4, right? So the key that you're looking for is for your car, right? What shape of corner allows you to get back onto the throttle as soon as possible? I would say is a pretty good place to start for how to look at this particular corner, right? Okay, so for me, my brake marker is the 100-meter board. I'll start applying the brakes just as I'm approaching it so that I am full brake right when I'm getting to the 100-meter board. Boom, right? Okay. There's certainly a little bit of wiggle room around that, but I think this is definitely a ballpark of where you're probably going to be braking. Probably not much before this, and not more than a meter or two after the 100-meter board, depending on you and the car you're driving. But in the Lambo, it's pretty good. You know, right at the 100-meter board is where I want to be. One thing that I want you to notice is that I am already well onto the red and white stripe curbing before I start braking, right? As soon as I come around that little bend in the front straight, I'm going to work my way back over and get my right wheels onto the curb well before I actually enter my braking zone, because I want this corner to be as straight as possible. And to do that, I don't want to be fighting to get the car back over there to where I want it. I want to be very, very straight into my braking as far as humanly possible. I'm going to carry that straight right up right through the gray asphalt on the right-hand side. Notice I'm just barely starting to get away from the red and white striped curb as I approach the 50-meter board. The danger here is that if you turn in too early, you are going to catch too much of the curb at the apex. That is going to give you the issue that I talked about to begin with. So you definitely want to come in a little bit wider so that you can make this a later apex and avoid most of that curb. Just get up right as close to it as you can. Straighten the car back out as soon as you are able to, and be extremely patient on the throttle. If you're too happy on the throttle, the naturally loose end due to the camber in the road is going to catch you, and you're going to start spinning the tires and losing time. So manage your throttle input on the exit of this corner. Once you get clear of it, you should go to full throttle and stay at full throttle. Work yourself back out towards the middle of the track. Turn 3, very similar. I think it's a little bit more obvious, the sort of pyramid shape of the curb on this one. And it's very similar. You can get the tires essentially right up to the top of the pyramid, but you don't want to go over them. If you do, that's where you're going to start unsettling the back end again. So you can attack this curb quite a bit. Just don't overdo it in the process. Let's see how far. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm just shy of the very top of the curb, and that would present no issues whatsoever. Okay, turn 4. Turn 4? Turn 5, sorry. It's hard to keep track of because there are so many false corners mapped out on this track. So, barbecue. One of the trickiest corners on the track and one of the most important to me because it is one of the easiest to get wrong and lose time. But once you get it right, you can gain a tremendous advantage over most of the rest of the field once you have it nailed down. So, once you come off of this curb, straighten your wheel up right out to the middle of the track. Don't flirt with that curb on the right-hand side. You don't need to. You don't want to be that far to the left anyway. Your entrance into barbecue needs to come from a wide angle. And the reason is because this is another off-camber corner, which means the back end is, again, going to be naturally loose on you and easy to get out of shape. So you absolutely have to be as wide as you can to straighten this corner up as much as you're able to. On off-camber corners like these first two that we're talking about at Crowthorne and Barbecue, because the off-camber throws off the back end, the straighter you're able to make the car and make the corner, the more you're able to mitigate the issue caused by the off-camber nature of the corner, right? So width on these two corners is critical. So stay center of the track, maybe just a little bit to the left of it, but don't even mess with that yellow curb on the left-hand side. There's nothing there for you over here. You absolutely want to be over here to the right-hand side. I'm going to point the car right out to the right side of the track. And you'll notice that just as I'm passing the curbing on the left-hand side, that is when I'm going on to the brakes. This is absolutely a much lighter massage of the brakes, requiring a deft touch than it would appear by the brake bar. I'm not trying to go anywhere near full braking on this corner because you're already entering the off-camber portion of it, and if you're too hard too late on the brakes, you're never going to make the apex, and you're almost certainly going to upset the back end on it. So so when I come through, as soon as the red and white striped curbing is passing out of my view, that's when I'm going to start gently getting on the brakes. And I do it gently because I don't want to unbalance the car any more than I have to because of the shape of this corner. I'm trying to go left, the track wants to pull me to the right. And that is a recipe for disaster if you're not careful. So, straighten up the wheels slightly. Just a small application of the brakes, just enough to slow the car a little bit and start getting it turned. At this point, you must be patient on both the steering and the throttle because this is another curb where it will throw you all over the place. So same thing, just very similar to turn one. You're in the middle of an off-camber corner. If you get too far up on this curb, up onto the very top of it, you're going to unbalance the car even more than the camber of the track surface is making you, right? So you're just adding to your problems. So you really just want to brush the curb, at most get slightly up on it. If you if you catch too much of this curb, because you will, right? It's an extremely hard corner to get right over and over and over again, and you will miss it from time to time. If you catch too much of it, and let me go up here to the apex. So let's assume at this moment that I'm a full, foot or 2 feet further to the left right now that I am. Stop getting on the gas. Pure and simple. If you get too far up onto this curb and you try to go full gas at this point, while the car is being upset by the peak of the curb itself, that is when you're going to wind up in the wall on the left-hand side, because the back end's going to spin right out from under you. So word of the wise, when you do screw this corner up, and you will, and you catch the apex too heavy, save it for another lap. Don't try to save your lap right there by getting back on the throttle. Back off. You've already made the mistake. Don't compound it. Let the car ride out the curb. Eat the time loss, and move on to the next corner. Don't flirt with it right here. But assuming you're able to apex it at a decent place, then look how far you have to wait before you can get back on full throttle, right? You've all probably done this track, and you've all done enough laps at this track that you can feel how slippery the car is when you're coming through the corner, right? That is because of the off-camber nature of it, and the car really never collects itself until you're well past the apex, and that's when you can really go back to full throttle. You really have to be patient at this corner. So I want to look at that one at full speed, and we'll go inside to do it. You've got to be gentle with the car here, period. If you try to start throwing it around too much, patient, now go, right? You absolutely should be trying to extend your exit out to catch every bit of this curb. There's nothing wrong with it. You're going to be out on the, I believe that's cement blocking or something that's to the red and white stripe. But regardless, you can come all the way out here. The key is you just don't want to come out so far that you can't get back inside to the track by the time that grading ends right hand side. If you do, you're going to get into the grass, and best case scenario is you're going to lose lap time. Worst case scenario, that's enough of a drop off that it will bounce the car, bottom it out, spin it, and put you into walls. So okay, once you've made it through there, get yourself back over to the left side of the track. Don't be bashful about getting to the left. As I'm approaching, I don't want to wait to get into position. I want to get into position so that all I have to worry about is my braking point and my turn-in point. So as you approach sunset, and you see the red and white striped, or not the red and white striped curbing, just the curb. Once the curbing starts to appear, get your car out there immediately and put your left tires right out onto the curb. Don't wait over here and then work your way out, because at that point all you're doing is adding inputs that you don't need to add, and variation in the corner that doesn't need to be there, right? Get your car out here, get set up, and get ready for your next braking point. My braking point for Sunset is the red striping on the right hand side. Orange, red, red, I think this one is. As soon as I am getting up to it, that's when I do a dab of the brakes. Once again, this is not a hard braking area. All I'm really looking to do is scrub just enough speed and put just enough weight on the front of the car in order to get it to rotate into the apex. So right there, just a dab of the brakes really. Never even go to 100% on the brake meter for this. The gearing, I think, is a big question here as to whether you take this in third or fourth. In the Lamborghini, I take it in third. I think there's a lot of cars that are going to be able to handle taking it in fourth. The Porsche almost certainly is going to take this in fourth, I would imagine. But I think a lot of cars might be sort of in between. If you're able to get the car turned in and hold it there without facing too much understeer, mid corner, then go ahead and take it in fourth and hang on to as much speed as you possibly can. But if it just won't turn well enough, then drop it down into third and then get right back on the gas in order to maintain the speed. As soon as I catch the apex of it right here, then I'm already going back to point. It's as much a feel thing as anything else. You're going to have to take your car to find out just how well it handles this corner before you know whether or not you're going to be able to get back on at full throttle. If you're taking it in fourth gear, you may have to delay a little bit longer, but getting back on the throttle because you're able to carry just a little bit more speed, and you'll just make it understeery. But if you're taking it in third, like I am, assuming you've hit the apex properly, then right at this point you should be able to go back to full throttle without running off on the left-hand side on exit. Dab, turn it in, let the front end work. Once it locks up and you've made the X, get back on it. Let it drift all the way out. Use as much of the track as you can. That's as far as you want to. I actually just barely clip the grass on that one, but that's okay. But anything along those lines will work. Let's see. I want. I think if you have problems at this corner with the backhand fishtailing around on you when you go to do your corner entry, that is probably an indication that you are. Go back and look at your brake input and see if it is coming a little bit too late, so that you are still forcing some weight out over the nose, when you're already starting your turn in. If you get that brake input hanging on a little bit too long and you've started your steering input, that's going to be where the back end lightens up, especially at high speeds like this corner is. So if that fishtailing is a problem on your entry here, that's where I would look, is the combination of your brake input and your steering input. Those two are probably coming a little too close together in time and unsettling the back end. Okay, Clubhouse. I love this corner. I really do. It's one of my favorite corners on the track. But it's not easy. I think it's really hard to get this one right. Let's go up to the curb first because I think it's another one that is important to talk about and dictates a lot of what you do as far as your setup to the corner goes. Because the next couple of curbs, this becomes critical. Okay, it's hard to see on console. This is I wish I had free cam to be able to show you. But what I want you to look at is on the red and white stripe curbing. Um, if you look, you can see where the elevation of the curbing really changes, right? So right in the middle and towards the back end of the first white stripe is where you get a big elevation change in this curb, right? And its sister is on the back end of this red and white stripe curb as you're exiting. Those are the 2 points where I think you have to be very careful on this corner and the next couple ones as we go through the S's. Um, you can absolutely use a considerable amount of this curb. What I don't think you can afford to do, at least not more than once and hope to get away with it throughout the race, is to ask your car to climb the front of this curb or to drop off the back end of the curb, right? If you get up, you get in too far on this curb too early and catch that little incline on the curb, you're really going to be putting your suspension and your grip levels to the test because it's going to unsettle the car badly. And your best case scenario is that you're going to lose a ton of lap time because you're going to have to wait for the car to recover. But it will absolutely toss you about. The same thing goes for, much harder to see here, but I think it's right there. So where let's see, where that white stripe is meeting the grass, I think is where you're seeing the decline in this curb, and you don't want to be on this curb when you reach that point any more than you want to be on that curb when the incline hits, because that's going to toss your car around significantly, so avoid it like the plague, right? So what does that mean though from the standpoint of entry? That means you cannot afford to have your apex too early on this corner. It must come mid corner at the earliest. If you cut it too close, you're going to find yourself on that elevation change, and you want to avoid. So in order to avoid that and get your apex where you want it, get your ass out here to the far right side. I'm in pretty good shape, but if I get the right tires out on the red and white striped curbing, even better, right? That is harder to do because you're coming from the left-hand side due to the exit from Sunset. So, like what I talked about on my approach to Sunset, I'm just going to get my butt over there onto the curbing immediately so that all I have to worry about is my braking zone. You don't have that option here. You're going to have to work your way over to the right side quickly. And it's difficult to get as far out there to the right-hand side as you want to in time for your braking point. But that's what you have to practice at in order to get it. Now, here's the beauty. So when you aim out here, right, just as I'm getting alongside the 50 meter board is when I'm going to brake. Your car with practice, and this is where practice comes into play. You absolutely can apply a little bit of steering when you go into heavy braking, just like I do right here, right? Because I've got the car moving over to the right-hand side to get it as far to the right as I can, but I also immediately have to be shifting back over to the left in order to get into the corner, which means I have to start turning at least a little bit as I'm entering my heavy braking zone. Your car can handle it, but it will only handle it if you are smooth on your inputs, which means it takes practice. But if you can do that, if you're able to get it out there far enough and get onto the brakes in a stable fashion, then you're going to find yourself right in the middle of the track and exactly where you want to be. At this point, because I'm in the middle of the track and I'm not too far to the inside, I'm in no danger whatsoever of catching the incline on that inside curb. Excuse me. I could easily be another foot or so to the left here, and that would really be ideal. So I missed this apex just a little bit, but that's okay. To the extent that you'd rather be too heavy on this curb or just a little bit off of this curb, I'd rather be just a little bit off because of the dangers for what could happen when you get too far up on it. But if you widen this out and take a later apex like this, I mean, really that's about where my apex is, and you can see how far up the red and white stripe curb before I hit it. The good thing about that is that I'm already going back to full throttle at this point, right? So you can get back on the gas much, much earlier if you can get the shape of that entry correct and take the curb out of the equation. And just like coming out of barbecue, you can use all the curb that's available here, including the grading. Just make sure that you're able to get back off of it and onto the track before you get up to the grass and it drops off into it. Okay, the S's. The S's are, in my opinion, the most important corners on this track. Largely because they are the hardest corners on this track, and they're very, very hard corners at very, very high speeds, or relatively speaking, right? Which means any mistake you make, you're not going to have time to do a lot of correcting. So if you get the S's wrong, let's face it, when we get to Sunday, you're going to see a lot of people in the grass here at one of these two corners. That's the way it always happens because it's so easy to make mistakes here. So let's go up to the second apex first, and then backtrack. Okay, first things first, the curb on the right. I actually catch this a little bit too heavy, which is actually good because for demonstration purposes, it's handy to see it so I can show you what it is that I've been talking about with the danger on. Fortunately, I didn't catch it so heavy that it upset the car too much. I didn't really have to back off. The Lambo was able to handle it, but it's not something that I would want to risk very many times during the race. So watch how much the Lambo starts starts bouncing around as soon as I catch this, incline on this curb. Boom, boom. Now watch it keep bouncing, 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 you know. It settled down pretty quick, so I was able to stay full throttle, it into the corner, and no harm, no foul. But that is an example of what will absolutely happen when you catch those curbs on all of these corners too early, right? So, since you know that you absolutely want to avoid that, that means your apex cannot be too early for this, right? And in order to avoid that and get the apex in the middle of this curb, that means you have to be a little bit more to the left than what I am right here. The only way you can get to that point without losing a ton of time is to have the car out in the middle of the track, right? So that you can open this corner up more. That is my goal every time I come through here. If you find yourself on the right side of the track entering this corner, don't be a hero. Drop down to second gear and save your car and save your race. Don't try to tough this corner out and this curb if you get too far to the right at your entry here, because it absolutely will kill you, right? But if you can get out to the middle of the track to the left, that's going to allow you to catch the apex of this curb a little bit later, right in the middle. And if you can do that, you'll be able to go to full throttle right here in the center of the corner, and you're gone. Okay, so that's essentially what I'm looking for from the standpoint of I've done this perfectly. Okay, is to get to the center of the track up on my my entry. Okay, if I'm going to get to the center of the track, that means I have to give something up to do that, right? Because if the left-hander were by itself and not part of a series of corners, you'd absolutely be getting back on the gas right here and letting it float right out to the right-hand side to maximize your exit. You can't do that. You have to make a sacrifice, and it has to be at this apex, okay, in order to get the car to the middle of the track to set up for your entry onto the to the right-hander. So that means you want a later apex so that you can hold it to the left as you make your exit coming out of the left-hander. And in order to do that, you must be as far to the right side as you possibly can. This is another one that I will try to get out there as soon as possible, get the wheels out onto the curbing and placed before I get to the braking zone itself. And just as I'm passing over the edge of the red and white stripe is when I start applying just a little bit of brake. I'm not going too heavy here because you're starting to turn and go downhill. Means the back end is going to start getting light on you, and if you get too heavy on your brakes or too heavy during input, then it will start coming around on you. So you've got to get with your inputs, get this corner. And it's added difficulty because your apex is blind. You don't pick it up until very, very late. So a lot of this corner is working on your own timing and figuring out exactly where you know it's safe to do certain things to put you in the position you want to be in. It's not something that you can really look at every single time, because even at this point, I still can't actually see my apex. It's not until I get all the way up to here that I really can pick up what it is I'm aiming for on this curb. You have the same problem of the elevation change on the curb right at the beginning. So if you try to take this, come in too soon, not only is your apex too early so that it's going to force you out to the right side further than you want to be on your exit, but you're also now going to have the elevation change in the curb to deal with. And this is not a place when you're making this turn and starting to go downhill where you want to be upsetting the balance of the car and throwing the suspension around. So if you find yourself running into the front part of this curb on the left-hander, catching that elevation change so it starts bumping the car around, if that is a problem for you, then you need to come back to right here and take a look at what you're doing. Because it means you're doing a couple of possible things wrong. Either you're too far into the left-hand side, which is closing down the corner and forcing you to turn in too early, right? Or even if you're far enough out to the right-hand side, you're beginning your turn too early, and that is putting you into the elevation change on the curb. Because that X is so blind, the front of the curb where the elevation change is also blind. So it's not something that you're going to be able to see until very, very late in the corner. So it's not something that you're going to be able to pick up from far enough away to avoid it. You are going to be mostly committed to your line by the time you get to the point where you can really pick up that curb, which means you have to practice where you place the car and where you make your entry over and over again until you're confident that that position that you've chosen will put you into a good position right here. To me, that's the key for this for the S's, because if you can get that right, then you're going to be able to get your car over to the center of the track on the exit. That is going to allow you to open up the right-hander, get back on the gas as soon as you hit the apex, and maximize your speed and your time through this corner. Okay? Because this series of corners is so difficult, I will take this in third gear, and I think most everyone will. But because it is so difficult, if you are newer to this track and you don't have the confidence yet, drop down to second for the left-hander. It will save your race. Okay? So work your way up to the confidence to be able to take this in third. But if you don't have it yet, understand that this right here will be the death of your race if you don't respect it enough. So do not hesitate to take second gear here for the entry on the left-hander. That will buy you a little bit of time and a little bit of room to maneuver, so that you can get through here consistently. If you can do that, I promise you'll pick up at least 2 spots in the race from people who don't respect it enough and wind up in the grass. I can virtually guarantee that. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this corner? If you get this apex correctly, and I mostly got it right here, It was a little bit off, but not by too much. You can pick up the throttle as soon as you get clear of the apex. From the standpoint of finding time, assuming you've reached the point where you feel like you're confident enough to take this in third gear consistently, there are a couple of problems that you're going to run into. One is that I think your instinct is going to be to do a full lift on the throttle for your entry into the right-hander, and you want to avoid that unless it is a control move to save the car because you've got it a little bit out of position. Okay, but if you're doing this corner correctly and you're in third gear, then you should just have a partial lift before you go into this apex, so that you're able to get back on full throttle as soon as you get to the center of the apex, right? So if you find yourself doing a full lift of the throttle, then I think I would either check I'd either go back and check my lines, make sure I'm absolutely getting to the points that I want to, you know. Am I getting as wide as I can on the entry to the left-hander? Am I really hitting the apex of the left-hander and allowing myself to come out to the middle of the track? That's probably the first thing I would look at, because I always tend to look at lines first. So if you're coming through here in third gear, you feel pretty good, but you're having to do a full lift, go back and look at those lines and see if there's any detail work you can do there in order to get further to the middle of the track prior to your entry into the left-hander. The other thing I think you have to be careful about here is oversteering the car at the transition from the left-hander to the right-hander. And actually, this is a good place to do the helmet can. Let's go full speed. And you'll see the amount of weight shift that happens at the time you transition from the left-hander to the right-hander. Boom. See how the car just throws over there to the left-hand side? You can absolutely make that worse by having that transition on the steering wheel be too harsh. So if you feel like your lines are all in good shape and yet you're still having too much instability right here at the transition point or as you're getting up to the apex, particularly if the back end is starting to slide on you, give some serious thought to what you're doing with the wheel at that transition, okay? Because there's a good chance you're yanking it too hard and adding to the already substantial weight shift that's going over to the left-hand side, okay? That absolutely can cause a problem right here. And the best way that I can suggest that you think about it is that, let's go in slow motion. If you're having issues with that and you want to check yourself, when you do your practice laps, try to think of your hands as being in molasses as you turn them at this transition point. You may very well screw it up initially and wind up over on the left-hand side because you've turned too late, you know. But with practice, it's absolutely doable. When what you're looking to do is you're looking to smooth out that weight transition as much as possible. The only way you can do that is with your hands on the steering wheel, and the transition in your steering must be more smooth and gradual in order to make the weight shift of the car more smooth and gradual. So if that's something you're struggling with, you need to slow your hands down at the transition. Think of them in, as moving in molasses, or whatever mental trick it takes in order to get you to do that. But that's one of the two biggest issues I think that you'll see coming through the S's. Okay, as we approach the hairpin, I think there's, first of all, there's one thing I want to say about it, and so there are 3 corners on this track that I think of as first gear turns. Crowthorne turn 2, right here at the hairpin, and when you get to the crocodiles. Okay. However, not a one of them is what you would call a true hairpin or a true first gear corner. You will see me take them in first gear, but you will see a lot of people take either some or all of them in second gear. And I don't think that either approach is correct or incorrect. It's one of the reasons why I think this track is deceptively fast, because even the slowest corners are really faster than they typically are at other tracks, right? When you come into a hairpin at other tracks, you're going to first gear, right? You absolutely don't have to do that here. You don't have to do it at Crowthorne, and you don't have to do it at Crocodiles. You can hold second gear. A lot of that is going to depend upon your personal preference, your style, and how you set up your car. But understand that when I talk about all 3 of those corners and I'm doing them in first, it's an option, and you don't have to stick with what I'm doing. So as you're approaching this hairpin, however, get yourself over to the right-hand side, and I'm trying to think if the reason that this is such a weird hairpin is that if this were just a normal hairpin, by this point I would already be going back to full throttle, and letting the car to the right. But you can't, because the track has another hitch in it that moves the track even further to the left. So your maximum exit point on the track doesn't actually occur as part of the hairpin itself. Your maximum exit point actually comes much, much further past the kink and well on to what is essentially the back straight before you actually get your car out onto the far right side of the track, right? That makes this an exceptionally weirdly shaped hairpin, and you have to deal with that. Now, the entry itself, I don't think is particularly unusual, other than the fact that it's blind. I think the entry is fairly straightforward. The one tricky part to it is the fact that you can't see the apex until you get really, really far up there. So I'll give you what I look at. Let's go to in-car cam. Okay, so as I'll move the car over to the far right-hand side of the track, and then I will point the nose. If you look at the Fanatec sign in front of us and the tree immediately to the right, I will essentially point the nose of the car right at that tree. Okay, and if I do that as I straighten up, as soon as I get into the braking zone, I'm perfectly lined up with the curb on the right-hand side. See how that now puts me pointing directly between the Fanatec sign and the tree? That's my goal, because I want to get out as far to the right for my entry as I can here. Look at it a little bit faster. Get over to the right, then point the nose at the tree. Boom, brake, straight into it. Try that kind of a visualization, either the tree or just to the right of the Fanatec sign, something along those lines, so that you know you have the car lined up properly as you crest that little rise. And I think that will make you a little bit more confident in your ability to put the car where you want to put it. So try that. Braking point for me is the Marshall stand on the right-hand side. And from my view, left-hand side. So as soon as the Marshall stand goes past my peripheral vision, that's when I'm going on the brakes. You'll see a lot of different approaches at this corner as far as how quickly somebody begins their turn in order to get to the apex, how much of the curb that you take, that kind of thing. This is because you're going at so much of a slower speed, the curb on the inside is not nearly as dangerous as it is on those higher speed corners. So I personally don't try to hit much of it. I'll get the wheels up onto the red and white striping a bit, but not usually any more than that. But especially I think for some of the front engine cars, you can eat a ton of that curb. You know, cut off some of the mileage that you have to travel, and be in perfectly fine shape. You know. So there's a lot of different ways to take that, because if you take more of the curb, that may affect where you actually do your entry, how early you come into the corner, you know, versus if you take it wider like I do, because I don't want to attack the curb that much. I want to hit the apex late so that I can get back full throttle, because the Lambo is a little more susceptible to curbs. You know, I can't be as aggressive on that thing. But a lot of cars and a lot of drivers are going to be able to. So you may be seeing people attack the curb aggressively. You may be seeing people attack it in second gear. They may be getting back on the throttle at different places. There are just a ton of options for this hairpin, and I think you're just going to have to do some practice to find out which one works best for you and the car that you drive, because I don't know that there's a single answer. For me, my goal is to get the car pointed straight as quickly as I can, so that I can get back onto full throttle. The danger, though, is that you open up the wheel too soon. So let me see if I can see this. Yeah, let's try that, so I can show you what this looks like from my view. So at this point, I'm massaging the throttle. I'm being patient. And there on the left-hand side, as soon as I start picking up the red and white striping on the left side, when that comes into my field of view, now I know that I'm pretty safe to start to really get the wheels straightened out and go back onto full throttle. I'm very comfortable that if I do it at that point, I am going to be able to hold the car on the track without getting into the grass on the right-hand side once you get around the bend. And let's see if So as soon as I pick that up, I start straightening up the wheel, get back to full throttle, and I'm going to be able to make this corner, and it'll put me right out on the curb on the right-hand side. Your biggest danger on this corner is not showing the throttle enough respect. You'll absolutely get into power oversteer here a lot if you're not, paying attention to what you're doing. If you don't respect this the back tires enough on this corner, they will they'll give up on you. So throttle modulation is critical here in order to keep those back tires underneath you long enough for the car to straighten up enough that they have enough grip for you to go back to full throttle. So if you find yourself losing the back end and getting power oversteer on your exit, then you need to take a look at your throttle application, because you're probably getting too happy on the throttle too soon. From a setup standpoint, there are things you can do to improve that if your driving style is one where you like getting back on the throttle early and often. That's my style. So there are things you can do from a setup standpoint. For instance, on this track, I very quickly dropped the preload differential down significantly in order to accommodate what it is that I'm trying to do here and a couple of other places. That mitigates the wheel spin I tend to get because I'm aggressive on the throttle early in corners. So there are things you can do to help that, but you still have to respect the corner itself so that the back tires don't get out from under you. Okay, let it drift out. I'll put the right tires all the way out on the curb until I hit the overhead bridge, and that is my cue to start turning in. Get the left tires at least onto the red and white striped curbing, if not a little bit over them. You can absolutely take a little bit of grass right there without doing it any harm. And then I will put myself right in the center of the track. Okay. From a visual standpoint, here's what I'm looking for at this point. I want the car in the center of the track straightened out, with the nose pointing between the end of the grandstand and the beginning of the yellow signs to the right of the grandstand. If I've got the car straight, the wheels straight, and the nose pointed right there, I know I'm in pretty good shape to accomplish what I want to accomplish going into Crocodiles. Okay, let's go to my view. Braking point is just as the 100-meter board passes through my peripheral vision, and from the way that I've positioned my car, that allows me to straight line brake all the way to the left side of the track, which opens up Crocodiles to the maximum extent possible. Let's see. So let's do wheel cam, so you can see what that looks like. Point the nose, straight line. Very hard all the way in, right? I think that this is one of those corners, a lot like turn 2. Yeah, I think a lot like turn 2, in the sense that Do I mean turn two? No, no, I don't. I mean clubhouse. This is very similar in to clubhouse, I think, in the sense that your breaking point will largely be determined by one, where you position the car leading up to it, and two, where you are at as far as the progression of skill level on the brakes. Okay, because if you are someone who still has a tendency to I don't know, to overdo it on the brakes, destabilize the car, and get it moving around on you a little bit, then you're probably going to have a hard time braking later in this zone. Whereas if you've gotten to the point where your skill level is advanced enough that you have some nuance in your braking and in how you control the car under braking, then I think that allows you to push this braking zone a little bit deeper. Because just like with Clubhouse, where you're coming over to the right side of the track, immediately entering the braking zone, and therefore having to put in a little bit of steering angle at the same time that you're going into heavy braking. You're doing a lot of the same thing here at an even faster speed and an even heavier braking zone, right? Because in that corner you're only dropping down to second gear, and it's a little bit faster corner. In this corner you're going to drop down all the way to first gear, maybe low second gear, but you're going to hold the brakes for a pretty significantly long time. So you're going to be under braking for a long time. It's going to be hard braking, and you're going to be adding a little bit of steering input at the same time. That takes a lot of skill and practice. So if you're not as far along your advancement in learning that kind of technique, then that's probably going to back up your braking zone just a little bit further, so that you have room to do what it is that you need to do. But regardless of where that happens and exactly how it happens, I do think you want to wind up at least to the left of the center of the track. And I played around with it. Anyone who watched my prep from Monday, I said I was going to play around with getting all the way over to the left-hand side. I didn't think it was necessary. I felt like it added complications and inputs that didn't need to be there. So in my opinion, you don't need to make this drastic attempt to get as far over to the red and white striped curbing as possible. I think if you can get substantially over to the left side of the track, you're going to do everything you need to do to open up this corner. It's a heavy trail braking zone, so you're going to hold it all the way up until the apex, or very close. I suspect that if there's a significant departure from that approach, it will be from someone who is taking this in second gear, and I'm going to put the Porsche in a special category because it's geared so differently from most of the other cars that a lot of corners like this, it's probably going to take second gear in essentially the same way I would take it in first gear. But if you see someone else who is still very fast through here, but in second gear, there's a decent chance that they might not be trail braking as long. I'm not sure about that. But I think you might see some variation in their technique and how they go about getting the car turned and back on the throttle at this point. This is another corner that gets off camber, and that means that we have a curb to worry about again. I don't like catching this curb because it's just not going to work well with the Lambo. In this case, because you want a pretty late apex on this, let's like I don't think anyone is going to be looking to apex this corner early. I just don't I don't see any benefit to doing that whatsoever. Um, I think everyone is probably going to have a goal to do this as a mid apex at the earliest and a late apex at first. And I tend to go for more of a late apex on this one. And because of that, if you get too close over there to the curb, you're going to catch the descending portion of the end of the curb if you're not careful. And when you're already at a bad camber and turning to go downhill yet again, with the back end being light, it is very easy for this curb to induce even more instability into than what you're already facing. So I'm not a fan of taking too much of this curb. It will happen because it's easy to misjudge it sometimes. So I'll tell you the same thing that I told you at barbecue. If you do find yourself in a position where you're going to catch too much of this curb or more than you know that you want to, don't be a hero. Back off, keep off of the throttle. Don't try to save your lap by pushing through and getting as much of that time back as you can. You've already made the mistake. It's done, and really the only thing you can do at this point is to make it worse. If you've caught too much of that curb, you get back onto the throttle too aggressively, you're absolutely going to spin it. This is another corner where throughout the race you are definitely going to see at least one or two people spin the car on the exit of this corner because they have destabilized the car too much, gotten it out of balance, and gotten back onto the throttle too early under bad circumstances and failed to keep control of the car, and it's just gone. And if you're lucky, you'll avoid them. If not, you're going to have 15 seconds of damage from T-boning them. So, but it's absolutely going to happen. Okay, you ready for Cheetah? The most awesome corner in the history of race circuit corners. First things first. When you exit Crocodiles, let the car drift all the way out onto the red and white striping, and even onto the grading to the left. You can go quite a ways before you start running into track limits violation. You can go a little bit further than I am right here. So don't be afraid of it. And I'm going to suggest to you that there is a massive benefit to letting your car drift out here to aid you in your entry to Cheetahs. Okay. So let's go up to the apex first, so we can talk about what we're doing. Okay, so let me be Captain Obvious first here. You can't touch that curb, pure and simple. You know that. You know that. Here's something to keep in mind. Right now, when I'm doing this lap, the track is in fast conditions. That means there is not as much rubber on the road as there will be when we actually get mid-race and you've got a bunch of cars doing laps. The track has gone optimum. How do I know this? Because this is you learning from my mistake. Once you get to mid-race, this is a 90-minute race, so probably a full hour of the race, you will not be able to see the difference between the yellow curb and the red and white striping, because everything has become so black that you won't be able to distinguish between the two. Period. Don't believe me? Go set up a single player session with optimum track conditions and see how easy it is to visually, miss this curb. Try it once. I highly recommend it so that you know what I'm talking about before we get to the race, rather than halfway through the race. Okay, so you know you can't hit that curb. Everybody knows that. How do you keep from doing it? To begin with, on the exit of Crocodiles, let your damn car get out here to the left and then keep it there. Okay? When I come out of my exit here, I do not let the car go back out onto the asphalt all the way. I put my left tires on that concrete and I damn well keep them there. Right? Because in order to stand any chance of getting through cheetahs quickly and consistently without catching that inside curb, you have to open it up as much as possible. If you're not out, and I've still 6-8 inches out here that I can still be using, right? So I want to use that too. If you're not practicing getting your left wheels out here on the curb, you are betting yourself to hit that inside curb at least one time during the race. So get your car out here to the left and practice from this point, because it's going to change your braking point and your turning point. If you are accustomed to having your car 3 feet to the right of where mine is, and you start practicing with it out here on the left, you are going to be shocked how much it opens up this corner and makes it less dangerous. Is it still a threat to catch that inside curb? Absolutely, that never goes away. I don't care how good you get at this corner. You can watch the best ACC drivers in the world, and they will catch this curb from time to time. So the danger never goes away. What I'm telling you is that if you want to mitigate the danger of this corner, you must have your left tire here on the red and white striping. Okay? So let your car drift out and then keep the damn thing there. When you're doing your practices this week, I want you to get so far out here that your left wheels wind up in the grass and you smash into the stands in front of you because you've lost control of the car. That's how I want you to practice, because you have to get comfortable with having the car out there to the left. It's exactly the same thing that I talked about when we were at Brands Hatch. When you don't have any room to maneuver, must practice being as far to the margin as you can, so that you know where you can stop and draw back a little bit. But if you go through this entire week and you've put your wheels on the grass because you were trying to get as much to the left as possible, I don't think you've practiced properly for this corner, unless you already know how to do it and you have it down. So that's my advice as far as practicing to get through cheetahs. Now, what you'll find out if you start working on that, and let me go to my view, because this is what I'll see as I'm coming up to it. I've got a couple of very handy visual references here. One is the beginning of the red and white striping, and 2 is the blue banners on the left side on the fences. Essentially, as soon as I get over the red and white striping and right before I get to the blue banners, that is my tap the brakes and turn in point. Okay? If you're out here this far, that turning angle doesn't need to be nearly as much as what you're accustomed to if you're towards the inside of the track. And you're going to find out that it's much, much easier to avoid that curb consistently as a result. But so get it out here as soon as you cross over the red and white striping. Just give it a tap to bleed a little bit of speed and get the nose of the car turned in, and then you can immediately go back onto full throttle with no danger of spitting out over the left-hand side into the grass. Let's go full speed and I'll show you what that looks like. The other thing that I want to point out, the advantage of this, of opening up this corner, is that it gives you more room to make mistakes. Okay, so right here, just after I've crossed the red and white striping and right before I get to the blue banners, that's when I tap the brake and start making my turn. I am physically farther away from the curb than someone who is farther to the right. Okay? What does that mean? That means I have more time to react to any error I make right now with the steering input. Because I can promise you there will be times when I turn in just a little bit too early, and I get to right here and realize, oh shit, I'm going to clip the curb. Okay? So the advantage is that the further you are to the left, the further you are away from the curb. That means you have more time to make a correction right here, right now, to keep yourself off the curb when you've made a small mistake. That's the other advantage to it. So if I've made a mistake, I can just put, counter steer just a little bit, get it away from the curb. Will it cost me a little bit of time? You bet. Do I care? No, not in the slightest, because there's nothing but death waiting for me right here. Okay. So that's my approach, and I think something similar to that in the ballpark of that approach is where you need to be to deal with cheetah. Your exit, you can run all the way out here onto the curbing. Obviously, you don't want to get out onto the grass. You've all been there as much as I have, so you know that's going to create a problem for you if you do. And then as soon as you get clear, get your butt back over to the far right side as quickly as you can. This is another one that's similar to the approach that we had at Clubhouse, where you have to get back over to the right-hand side quickly and get back on the brakes. So you want to get over there, get lined up, get your right tires out onto the red and white striping or as close to them as you can as soon as you're able to, in order to open up the last corner. The Marshall stand is my braking point. I'll go hard on the brakes, and I will hold a straight line brake essentially all the way up until you see where the blue paint starts. That's basically where I start turning. Where I start turning in, because I want a late apex on this corner. Most likely, if you are struggling on this corner, there's a good chance it's because you are turning in too early. Because this corner, more than any other, is probably where the crowning of the curb will get you into trouble. You're putting a hell of a lot of pressure on the tires at this point because it's a fast, slow corner, right? So you have an enormous amount of steering input going in while you're trying to get back on the throttle as quickly as possible because you have a very long straight ahead of you. And the sooner you can get back on the throttle here, the more time you make up when you're on the straight. So there's a lot of internal pressure to get back on the throttle as quickly as humanly possible on the exit to this turn. The problem is that if you get up too far on this curb, and I personally wouldn't want to be any farther than I am right now. You can just see that to the left of my tires is where the actual crown of the curb is. If you start getting up there, that's where you really start running into issues. And it usually means that you've entered this corner too soon, which is getting you up on the curb too much. So I want to apex this corner on the last third of the corner, not in the middle of the corner. But regardless of where you do it, you must be patient enough on the throttle that you know you have traction underneath you on the back end. Because if you don't, then you will absolutely induce power oversteer and put yourself into the wall on the left-hand side. Excellent chance that between Division 1 and Division 2 this weekend, at least one person is going to do that on Sunday, where they're going to get too happy on the throttle too early, induce power oversteer, and put their nose right into the wall on the left-hand side. Let's see. So and use all of the curb on the exit. You know, if you start getting too happy out there on the exit, you'll start picking up track limit violations. So watch that a little bit. But you can use a ton of that curb. Without any real problem. Let's see. One other thing that I'm going to suggest that you add to your practice at some point this week. Okay. Let's see, it would be, yes, here, hairpin, and crocodiles, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So right here at turn 2, and then at the hairpin, and crocodiles. I think those are probably the most important ones. To a lesser extent, I think the last turn as well, but for sure these 3 corners. I strongly recommend that you do a few laps running the far inside defensive line because those are the 3 areas I would say that you are most likely to be attacked, and you really have to know where the breaking points are in order to successfully defend in these corners. So there's if I'm on the far left-hand side and I don't screw around, if I'm going to defend, I'm going to defend. I'm going to get to the inside, and you're going to go to the outside of me. I won't screw around with it. And where my breaking point would be essentially right at the 100-meter board here, it's going to most likely be just a couple of meters before that, you know. But if you don't know where that is, then you are going to blow right through the apex and into the car that is trying to pass you on the outhand side, on the outside, and it's going to be your fault because you didn't know what you were doing, right? Same thing. Same thing is going to happen here, right? you are going to you're going to make a small mistake going through the S's. The guy behind you is going to get a run on you, and you are going to have to defend, which means you're going to have to come to the all the way to the inside. Don't screw around. Get your butt to the inside so that they know what you're doing, right? And they are going to take the outside line and try to pass you on the outside. You have to know where your breaking point is. You know, is it right at the Marshall stand like it normally is for me? You know, or is it just a little bit before that? Because if you screw it up, same thing. You're going to go blow right through the apex, and you're going to knock them right off the track because they're trying to come around the outside of you. It's not enough just to cut someone off. You have to be able to hold the apex when you take a defensive line to the inside. So these are extremely obvious areas where people are going to come under attack, and you need to know how to defend them. Okay, same thing for crocodile, right? If you're going to defend, this one is probably the most difficult of the three because if you defend to the inside on this one, you are fundamentally changing the shape of the corner for yourself and the person who is attacking you. So you need to practice where your breaking point changes if you're much farther to the inside than I am right now, because you're shutting that corner down so much when you're defending to the inside on this one. So you're going to have to be able to hold that and not blow through the apex once again and take out the person who's on the left side of you. Here's the other reason this one is the toughest. Because when you defend to the inside on this one, it is much, much easier to get caught on this curb on the inside. And if you do that, you will do the attacker's job for him, right? Because you're going to run into the exact problem that I was warning that we need to avoid at this corner. You are going to induce power oversteer as soon as you put your car onto this curb while you're trying to defend. So not only do you need to be able to hold the apex here when you're coming up the inside and braking, but you need to be able to hold it without getting up onto that curb too far and unbalancing and upsetting your car. So that's my advice for you as far as defending. Take a few laps and run those lines at least on those three corners, and it will almost certainly pay dividends for you come Sunday. Okay, let's do full lap. In-car cam first. overhead view. I'll check the delta at the end. I think this was a 141.8, if I'm not mistaken. It was a good lap. But there's more there. I mean, you can see mistakes that are made, apexes that are slightly missed, in one way or another, that kind of thing. So there's still a bit more time in this lap. Forty-one 8. 41 9? No, next lap. Sorry. Dumbass. Forty-one 8. Good lap. Okay, and that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions, shoot them to me. Otherwise, I'll see you on the practice track and this weekend for the race. Take care. Have a good night, guys.